Okay. So that was the introduction. I'll be happy to answer any more questions you have about my institution afterwards. This is a subject that I got interested in since the last 1 year or so. Again, from my perspective, I'm not really a cultural scholar. I started my PhD for 1 semester in cultural studies, but that is the only experience I have of academic cultural studies. I'm not a management person, I'm not a policy person, but I'm a designer and I have worked for many years with craft communities, in the cultural space, and in the recent year I've been working as a curator as well. So I'm trying to articulate a perspective on what can be done with culture. And a lot of this comes from my own experience in India and what I see happening elsewhere around the world. So it may not be a comprehensive or very thorough thesis as yet, but I hope that with your input and advice, maybe I can develop it into something stronger. What is cultural change? As I see it, cultural change is contributed to by a number of players, individuals, institutions, the environment plays a role, chance plays a role. So all these things combine to participate and contribute to the transformation of culture as we know it. But it is not always organic, it is not always benign, it is not always inclusive. There are certain processes that actually impose a kind of cultural change on one set of people. The main players, the main actors of cultural change remain the state, institutions, industry, and commerce. So it's very clear that there's not much room for the public at large, generally people, to actually participate in or influence cultural change, except in the capacity of subjects or recipients. Sometimes we can do so with our vote. We can vote one government in or one policy in or out. But more than that, as active participants or contributors, we don't really have a role to play. We do have one way of participating in cultural change, which is through subversion, because at every aspect of our life, we are trying to work within the structures that come down to us or that we are bound by versus and balancing it with our own individual or personal context. And this is something that Michel de Certeau has written about in a very interesting book called The Practice of Everyday Life. So he calls the people, in that sense, the marginalized majority, that what they can do is through everyday acts of subversion. And he says that things like the way we read, and read not only in text, but read the world around us, the way we talk or narrate, the way we play, the way we use things or not use things, the way we walk, the kind of clothes we wear, these are all actions through which we can and often do subvert the cultural system. And if you put it all together as a series of individual subversions, it actually becomes quite a formidable influence on cultural transformation. But the question remains, and I am curious to know this question, to ask this question, whether this subversive act, if put together, it actually strengthens society, and if it's democratic or not. These are two important criteria for me that I want to explore. For that, I look at the concept of social capital. I mean, currently that's the term that's in vogue. I'm not sure it's the final term yet, but it is an important and inspiring concept which tries to calculate, if you like, the strength of society as we know it. And it is a recent idea, and it is, perhaps in my mind at least, it's a more effective idea than other forms of measuring the state of our well-being. So here are some definitions of social capital, which is that in life which tends to count for most in the daily lives of people. So daily lives of people is important to me: goodwill, fellowship, mutual sympathy, and social intercourse. So we are talking about social values and the strength, the kind of social glue, if you like, that holds people together and that strengthens the society. The recent definition by Robert Putnam is connections among individuals, the kind of networking that happens at the informal level, like is perhaps happening here as well, and the norms of reciprocity and trustworthiness. So the level of trust in society, not in a one-to-one sense, but in a general sense, that arise from them. He's putting this kind of a value onto social capital. I find these definitions very interesting. I know that there's a lot more in the field of social capital that's being written about, but these two are important definitions for me to work with right now. How does state handle social capital? This is from Francis Fukuyama, who's written a fairly interesting article on the relationship between state and social capital. He says modernists believe that informal systems of organization and management need to be replaced with formal ones. I know this very well because one of the founding documents on which has inspired design education in India, the Eames report or the India report, it exactly talks about this. It talks about the replacement of traditional structures, traditional forms of knowledge, traditional organizations with modern ones or formal ones. In fact, he quotes Weber, who says rational bureaucracy constitutes the essence of modernity. But he also says that despite this belief or despite this vision, which is perhaps 100 years old now, informal coordination continues. It has not ended. It has not died out. And it has in fact become more important as economic activity has become more complex and technology has become more sophisticated. So it's very interesting that the kind of personal contacts, the trustworthiness, the networking that we do on a Facebook is suddenly becoming an important aspect, is being seen as perhaps almost some traditional replacement of traditional ways of informal networking, but which has not been eliminated. So social capital in this case, which can be seen as an aggregate, as a sum total of all these informal coordinations, the full network, is a byproduct, he says, of many factors which are outside the control of governments, like religion, shared histories, social systems, traditions, and so on. So he's now saying that the state, as you can see, cannot do very much. Unlike economic policies or institutions, social capital cannot be easily created or shaped by public policy. So it's something that has a life of its own. States can influence it, can do something to it, but it cannot determine it. It cannot program it. What he continues to say is, governments can at best, produce social capital via education, because education is a socializing process. And if you structure education and make it available to all your children or all your youth in a certain age group, in a certain form, then you do actually influence the strengthening or the networks that form in society. They can indirectly nurture it by providing vital public goods and ensuring property rights and public safety. In other words, if your general state of living is assured, you are secure, then it makes for good strength of social capital. But states can have a negative impact on social capital when they start to undertake activities which are better left to private sector or civil society. So he's also giving us a caution, and in this he gives the example of religion or of globalization as two forces which are best left to not really handled by the state, but left to other institutions to undertake. Here is another point of view from an Australian commission on social organization, a productivity commission. Here are some ideas that they came up with for enhancing social capital. They said strengthen family ties. So the family is an important unit in their picture of what constitutes social capital. So find ways of strengthening family ties. Education comes back again. So socialization through education is another important way by which social capital can be enhanced. Increase community participation and volunteering, get people to work with each other, to connect with each other, to participate in each other's lives. Urban and housing design, the actual design of physical environments, the way we live, the way we are neighbors, the way we interact with each other on a day-to-day basis, they can have an important aspect on the quality of social capital. Build or develop community facilities and assets like galleries, museums, libraries. These are all resources, public resources, make more of them and make them better available. Internet and telecom. Obviously, the internet is now being seen as a very important platform for supporting networking of the informal kind. And they have already identified this as an important policy imperative to make this available and accessible to a large number of people. Corporate social responsibility is another area by which they feel they can try and bridge the gap, the distance between business or industry and society or community. And finally, increase citizen participation in governance. Give people voice, listen to people, and try and bring them into decision making or policy debates as much as possible. Some ideas that came up from there. But what I find missing is, where is the culture? Where are the arts? I mean, there are references to it, but for me, culture is a fundamental, basis for social capital, because relationships, the way we interact with each other, is all very, very intimately connected with culture. Václav Havel, the ex-president of the Czech Republic, has said the arts offer a unique means of connecting us to our common humanity. And I think he said it the best of all. So I think definitely we need to explore this a lot better. I mean, through our systematic research, through publication, through discussions like these, to try and establish the connections and dynamics between arts and culture and social capital. I think this is an under-researched area, and I think we should really be working on this a lot more. On the other hand, here is how the state, in India at least, also looks at culture. Culture is seen largely as institutions and artifacts. Here is a news report that I saw recently where the Prime Minister has regretted that an allocation of 90 crore rupees, which is 150 million kroner, was allotted to some institutions for modernizations, and they could not spend the money. And he regrets that, unfortunately, these institutions have not been able to fully utilize this grant. I hope that they will work harder, and so on and so forth. So at the policy level, and our Prime Minister is also the culture minister of the country. He holds both the portfolios. Seems to be, engaging with culture or envisioning culture through institutions, through the collection and display of artifacts.